I'm the Philosophical Bachelor, and today I'm going to look at the last of 5 papers that Charles Sanders Peirce published in the philosophical journal The Monist. This paper is entitled Evolutionary Love and was published in 1893 January. He will evaluate 3 different theoretical positions on evolution, the names of which he invents, deriving their meanings from their respective Greek etymological roots. The first is Tycheism, which is based on chance. The second is Agapeism, which is based on love. And the third is Anankeism, which is based on necessity. Just to be clear, by evolution, Peirce is not referring only to biological evolution, where Charles Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection is the accepted theory today. When speaking of evolution, he means it in the broad sense as a form of development, be it of bodies or of ideas. In his account, since the beginning of philosophical thought, there was already the search for a universal principle. When humankind departed from myth towards the use of their reason, the earliest principle they came up with was love. Pre-Socratic philosopher Empedocles puts love and hate as 2 opposing powers which are the governing principles of everything. Later Christian thinkers thought of a one supreme being who made everything from nothing and is characterized by love. The Apostle John spoke of how God is love, but if how things began was with love, with its close correlate kindness, then how can hate and evil ever enter the world? Just as darkness is simply the privation of light and not an object in itself, Peirce suggests that hatred and evil are mere imperfect stages of love and loveliness. A love which embraces hatred as an imperfect stage of it, even needs hatred and hatefulness as its object. For self-love is no love. The logic, while warped, is that for there to be love, there needs to be something to love. That thing needs to be defective, contrary to the idea that pure love can only love what is pure. One way to understand this is that for love to manifest itself in its extreme, it needs to love what is bitterly hostile and negative to itself, since that is the ultimate test of love. It is easy to love what loves you, but the strongest love can only be the strongest if it loves what hates it. True love is not a love which benefits oneself, but one that sacrifices one's own perfection to the perfectionment of your neighbor. Peirce chooses to interpret the commandment recorded in the Gospel of John, love your neighbor as you love yourself, as the formula of an evolutionary philosophy where growth comes only from love, from the ardent impulse to fulfill another's highest impulse. Because we love our neighbor for his sake, we are willing to be less perfect so that he can be more perfect. Peirce wants to think of neighbor not in the sense of people living close by, but people or even things that are important to us in life and feeling. He cites an example from his own experience. Having come up with an idea, a theory, for instance his metaphysical theory, he is willing to sink himself in perfecting it. To make it grow, he needs to care for it the way one tends flowers in one's garden. So in this case, his neighbor is his theory of metaphysics. Yet his epoch, the 19th century, is characterized not by love but greed. He terms it as the economical century, where one puts one's intelligence into serving one's greed. Such a doctrine came from the century before, where Bernard Mandeville in his Fable of the Bees and Adam Smith with his Invisible Hand lay out a microeconomic theory where each bee or person, in seeking and caring only for one's own self-interest, create the so-called best society. Peirce laments this exaggeration of the beneficial effects of greed, that greed is the great agent in the elevation of the human race and in the evolution of the universe. He believes that Darwin's On the Origin of Species, published in 1859, was influenced by this type of thinking, which extends politico-economical views of progress to the entire realm of animal and vegetable life. It features a resource-scarce world where creatures are jammed together such that the ones with the slightest advantage wants to force out those less pushy. Ruthless greed and an attitude of every individual for himself are rewarded with survival and reproduction, while the less selfish perish. Peirce contrasts this gospel of greed with the doctrine of love from the New Testament, which teaches that progress comes from every individual merging his individuality in sympathy with his neighbors. Darwinian evolution is a natural selection based on chance variation, or Tycheism. In this paper, he did not explain the chance element much since he already did so in previous papers. Instead, he observes that the 13 years preceding Darwin's 1859 book was a particularly productive period for science, pointing out the many advances including how statistics applied to molecular physics yielded the kinetic theory of gases, the formulation of the conservation of energy, and how chance can lead to physical laws that are non-energy conservative. Jeremy Bentham's utilitarianism has also gained traction and was a natural ally of the economics of greed. Anesthetics had also been discovered, leading to a great decrease in human suffering, which Peirce thinks inclined people to relish a ruthless theory because they were less acquainted with pain. While the last point is debatable, Peirce is explaining why the world was receptive to a theory like Darwin's, even though it was unproven. An alternative evolutionary theory attributes progress to necessity, what Peirce calls anarchism. Anarchism presupposes a teleology, a predefined goal towards which living things head towards. Peirce thinks that theories of this ilk got their idea of mechanical necessity from the success of mechanics in science. He had referred to Clarence King's theory where evolution proceeds rapidly after a climate cataclysm out of the necessity for survival in his first Monist paper. Other anarchistic theories include August Weismann's, who taught that offspring are mechanical resultants of the heredity from two parents. Evolution from chance variation, Tycheism, and evolution from mechanical necessity, anarchism, are directly opposed, but there remains one more set of evolutionary theories based on love, agapeism. Agapeism is exemplified by Jean-Baptiste Lamarck's theory. In this theory, individuals develop adaptations during their lifetime from use or disuse of body parts which are transmitted to their offspring. For instance, a father who had developed strong muscles from manual labor will transmit strong muscles to his child. The cause of the growth adaptations are due to striving and exercise, while atrophy is from the lack of striving and exercise of the relevant body parts. Because striving is a mental phenomenon and habits are not formed physically but psychologically, it is not of the mechanistic necessitarian strain of anarchistic evolution. New spontaneous forms are first created, after which habits forces them into harmony with the body. Peirce sees the process of adaptations arising in response to striving and then brought into harmony as the action of love, and evolution due to love or agapeism. Peirce sees Tycheism and anarchism as degenerate forms of agapeism, as resembling agapeism, though somewhat lacking or deficient. Remembering that Tycheistic evolution mostly takes place through small changes, it can be argued that in addition to those changes, there is also for the most part a preservation of the form of the being, in which the changes are then brought into harmony with what is preserved, making it a kind of agapeism. However, Tycheism, because it operates by chance, pushes out the weaker and hence is not a true agapeism but a degenerate one. He adds, in genuine agapeism, advance takes place by virtue of a positive sympathy among the created springing from continuity of mind. This is the idea which Tycheism knows not how to manage. Proponents of anarchism may claim that this defect of Tycheism is remedied in its teleological doctrine of necessity, where despite ups and downs, creation is moving towards perfection. However, the problem with such an idea is that living freedom is practically omitted from its method. It makes the history of life an inexorable engine moving towards some mysterious goal. Nonetheless, in the very nature of things, the line of demarcation between the three modes of evolution is not perfectly sharp, writes Peirce. The concepts overlap. Do they, however, describe how development takes place in reality? Peirce examines the historical development of human thought to see if these modes fit. To recap, Taikiism comprises slight chance departures from established habits in random directions. From the unforeseen results, some then become habits. For Anarchism, new ideas necessarily arise from external causes such as changes in the environment or internal causes such as the logical development of one's own thought. Agapeism is neither chance nor goal-driven, but takes place by an immediate attraction for the idea itself. By this, Peirce means that even before we subject the idea to a deliberate evaluation, we already somehow intuit its importance or truth. This happens by the power of sympathy, that is, by virtue of the continuity of mind in three ways. 1. A kind of mob psychology, where the idea first affects a body of people and then affects the individual, which is in powerfully sympathetic connection with the collective people. 2. The idea affects the person directly, but he is only able to understand or appreciate the attractiveness of the idea by virtue of his sympathy with his neighbors. I understand this to mean that the context of his community enables him to understand the idea. Peirce gives the example of St. Paul on the road to Damascus, where the idea of Christianity struck him in a brilliant light. He understood its meaning because of his wider understanding of Christianity, though up to that experience he was a non-believer and in fact a persecutor of Christians. So he knew something about the religion which others around him believed in, but he himself did not believe in it until his direct experience. 3. The idea affects the person directly by virtue of an attraction it exercises upon his mind, even before he has comprehended it. Peirce calls this the divination of genius, due to the continuity between the man's mind and the Most High. The sympathy here is between the person's consciousness and God or the universal consciousness. Peirce now tries to look for proof of these three forms of evolution. Insofar as Taikiism operates, evolution takes place by small steps. He looks at the normal distribution of the heights of man, and the fact that there are very few outliers relative to the median points to the work of Taikiism. More generally, he thinks that whenever people's thoughts are caused to deviate from their inclinations by small, imperceptible steps, Taikiism is in action. He gives a lengthy account of the spread of Christianity in medieval times, where small deviations in thought led to its growth and later decadence. The journey seems incoherent or directionless, hence demonstrating the randomness of Taikiism. As for Anarchism, evolution should proceed by rapid changes broken by interludes of stability. This is because in proceeding towards a goal, the path should be persistent until it is realized to be the wrong path, after which it is discarded in favor of the next presumably best path. He sees two forms of anarchism, external and internal. External anarchism is the development driven by external circumstances. For instance, war can cause a big shift in the way people think about society or politics. Internal anarchism comes from an individual's adaptation to his environment. If internal anarchism is right, then big changes should be observed in every generation. That, however, is not the case, as Peirce observes that big changes in the development of Rome took place not over each generation of its people but over centuries. You may already realize that Peirce's main interest in this article is agapeism. In his first Monist articles, he had already spelled out how chance leads to strict laws of nature. In his second, he has decried necessitarianism in favor of chance, though we can accept that things do proceed in rather stable ways until big paradigmatic changes take place. This might be considered a vindication of external anarchism, though we will see that Peirce will explain these big changes in thought through agapeism. He proposes that agapeism is distinguished by its purposive character towards the development of an idea. This may sound anarchistic also, but as he had explained, the demarcations between the three modes are not sharp. How I view the difference is that in anarchism, the adaptations are reactions to changes or circumstances, while in agapeism, it is a direct agapic or sympathetic comprehension and recognition of an idea by virtue of the continuity of thought. As evidence, Peirce points out how all the greatest achievements of mind have been beyond the powers of unaided individuals, with many major discoveries occurring simultaneously and independently. He regales his readers with many examples ranging from Gothic architecture, which is hard to replicate today and yet in its time produced frequently by many different people, to scientific discoveries which occur almost at the same time by individual thinkers separated by vast distances and did not have the benefit of one another's insights. For instance, evolution by natural selection is today attributed to Darwin, but the topic was presented to the world at the same meeting by him and also Alfred Russel Wallace independently. The idea was also anticipated by others before them. I also want to cite two examples that Peirce did not write about in his article. Newton today is known as the inventor of calculus, but in fact, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz published the idea before Newton did. The 4-minute mile run was considered impossible until it was done in 1954 by Roger Bannister, after which, just 2 months later, it happened twice by Bannister and another athlete, John Landy. Peirce himself has pointed out how Euclid's axioms were thought incorrigible for over 2,000 years, until three mathematicians conceived how his fifth axiom of how parallel lines do not converge was proven wrong independently in the late 1820s and early 1830s. For inventions, the ones ultimately credited stood on the shoulders of others. An example not in Peirce's paper was Thomas Edison's invention of the electric light bulb. In reality, the incandescent light bulb was the result of contributions from hundreds of inventors over the decades, according to a contemporary intellectual property firm. Peirce surmises, I doubt if any of the great discoveries ought properly to be considered as altogether individual achievements. He takes this to be evidence of the sympathy of minds and hence proof of agapeism. In conclusion, Peirce, in his fifth and final paper in this series on his Metaphysics published in the Monist, examined three modes of evolution: Tycheism, which is based on chance, anarchism, which is based on necessity, and agapeism, which is based on love. It is not just one of these modes that prevails, but all three modes can be seen in different developments. I think I will write one more essay to sum up the entire series of Peirce's Metaphysics, drawing insights across the 5 papers of the novel metaphysics that Peirce has to offer. Thank you for listening to the Philosophical Bachelor.